All right, guys, we are live. Here we are. My name's Nathan, otherwise known as Old Man Bills. We got Benefactor here. Gerald's here. We also have Crypto here. And we have our special guest, Shawn Calderon. Shawn, how you doing?
I'm doing great, Nathan. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, not a problem, man. We're all checking out your coils there, man, and they're just awesome. Everybody's been waiting for this.
I appreciate that.
So check it out. Shawn's got some stuff to present. I'm going to bring it up. Shawn, if you want to get into it, if you want to say anything, by all means, let it happen.
Awesome. Sounds good. Hey, apologies for not having video ready. I had to kind of throw some stuff together to just get the audio working. So I'll be the talking still pick during this presentation. So thanks a lot, Nathan. I met Nathan a couple months ago. He was working on a Tesla coil as I was, and I had sent him some video clips of what I was working on. And Nathan, he basically took my little cell phone clips and put them together and made quite a montage. And that's really the impetus for me doing this presentation and entering YouTube world. So I put together some slides and a few video clips to just talk about what I'm doing. Before I get started, when I was in the Navy, I was a trained electronics technician, and I was electronics technician on the USS John Paul Jones for 6 years. After that, I did a tour of drill sergeant duty for 3 years. After I got out of the Navy, I taught myself how to compute a program and began my career in pharmaceuticals. I ended up staying in IT for about 17 years before an early retirement. And it hasn't just until recently that I've started this hobby. About 14 months ago, I decided to pick up the soldering iron again and get back into designing electronic circuits and working with electricity as I did about 28 years earlier. And I unfortunately couldn't recall most that I'd learned in the Navy. So I needed a book to get started. And I found this book here you can see in the slide 1. And this book is really good for 2 reasons. One, it gives you a really good introduction to the topic of electrical engineering, but it also is a good reference book so you can always refer to it when you have questions about building your circuits. So I thought I'd share that before I get into the stuff that I'm working on. Next slide, please.
Yeah, that'll probably help, man, if I go to do that. Hold on. There you go.
Awesome. So what I wanted to do to get into the hobby of electrical engineering was I wanted to create high voltage. And so as I was researching the topic of high voltage, of course, the famous and infamous Tesla coil came up. And this really excited me. Here you could have something you can plug in and it can throw lightning bolts. And so I ordered one from China. It was a kit and it looked something like this. And when I got it running, the first thing I noticed was it was extremely loud, obnoxiously loud. The second thing is it had a few ways where if you touched it, you could be electrocuted seriously. So it was dangerous. It was loud. And then thirdly, it was creating a lot of ozone. It was creating a lot of nitrous oxide and other dangerous gases as it was throwing lightning bolts. And then lastly, I just thought they were ugly. They all look the same like this. And so I thought, well, maybe I can do a different take on Tesla coils. And so what I did is I started to design my own Tesla coils, and it starts with the ZVS circuit. Next slide. The humble ZVS circuit. You can buy these from Amazon. They run you about $27 right now. And yet this circuit is an amazing, amazing system. For general purposes in this presentation, I'd like to just introduce it as the high voltage oscillator. That's what it is, a high voltage oscillator. And it's very efficient, so efficient that when you're using it, you really don't have to worry about cooling or your power transistors or your MOSFETs burning up. So this is the circuit that I will be using throughout all of the presentations and videos that I'll be sharing. In fact, that intro video, I was using this same exact circuit for every Tesla coil that you saw. So this is the circuit that I use, except for I take off the capacitors. And the reason for that is the circuit has too much capacitance in order to be used for a Tesla coil. That's the only reason why the capacitors go. Next slide. I was asked by Charlie C, why do I use the ZVS circuit and not other circuits? Well, there are a lot of plans, a lot of diagrams, a lot of circuits, a lot of schematics on the topic of Tesla coils. But the reason why I use the ZVS is, one, it's very simple. It only has 12 components, and you can even get that down to 10 components. So it's simple. That makes it easy to build. That makes it easy to troubleshoot. Another reason is it's very powerful. Some of the clips I'm going to share with you, it's going to be pumping out 1,000 watts. Yes, 1,000 watts for a little 6-inch coil. It's pretty amazing. It's rugged. I can beat it up all day and it'll still work. And it can do a lot more things than power Tesla coils. And so if I have the opportunity to share again a presentation on Nathan's channel, I'll show you some of the other inventions that I'm using it for. Next slide. When you think of the ZVS, you need to think of it as a high voltage oscillator. And then when you want to figure out the frequency that it's going to oscillate, you only need to think of two things: the capacitor and the coil. That's all you have to be concerned about. It is what is called an LC tank circuit. If you figure out your capacitance, if you figure out your inductance, then you can just plug that into any frequency calculator. There's a lot of free ones on the internet. Then it will tell you the frequency of your ZVS oscillator. I kind of simplified it here so where it's just completely bare bones. When you look at prints and see videos on the ZVS, they're all overcomplicated in my book. They're just people like to make simple things hard. So always be thinking about these two values, and then you will be able to control the output of your ZVS. Next slide. Here's a calculator that I found online. I plugged in the 4 nanofarads for the capacitor. I plugged in the 4 microhenries for the inductor, and I ended up with an output frequency of 39 megahertz. Now that is way too high for a ZVS to handle. The range of frequency for the ZVS is around 25 kilohertz all the way up to about 500 kilohertz. Those are the ranges you want to stay in, because those are the limitations of how fast the MOSFETs can switch, how fast the diodes can switch. And so because of that, it's not able to perform in the megahertz range. And if you find a ZVS that can perform in the megahertz range, please tell me. That would be awesome to see. So it's really that simple now. You have control of your ZVS if you control these two values. You can determine its frequency by controlling these two values. Next slide. So when I built my first ZVS Tesla coil, here it is on the screen. You can see that the ZVS is on the lower left. You can see that copper tubing that wraps around the red cylinder. That's the primary coil. And then the red cylinder in the middle is the secondary coil. And if you look at the tip there, the copper tip there, you'll see a little breakout, a little purple flame. And this was my first time getting a ZVS circuit working for a Tesla coil. So it was just a really amazing breakthrough for me to now start down my road of leveraging the powerful ZVS. Next slide. In the background on the oscilloscope, you can see how the ZVS is powering the Tesla coil. The frequency S wave, you can see there, the sine wave in yellow is the pulse that is going through the primary coil. The green signal, you'll start to see it as a line, and then it works its way up and down till finally it builds momentum at the end. That is the secondary coil working its way toward a resonant frequency, so then it can output that purple arc out the tip there you're seeing on the screen. Now, this is what's happening at 300,000 times per second. It's doing this inside primary, secondary frequency or resonant frequency output. Next slide. So that's just another close-up. You can see the primary frequency doesn't really change in amplitude, but the secondary frequency starts to build up from left to right, and then it discharges, and then it starts all over again. Next slide. This is what your ZVS looks like if you're not shortening your leads. All of the leads that connect things up in your circuit, if they're too long, you're going to pick up noise and get this distortion. And so when you're putting together your ZVS, it's good to have short connections to the capacitors and the coils. Next slide. So what I've done is, instead of winding a Tesla coil with one layer of copper wire, I 3D print a cylinder with deep grooves. And then inside those grooves, I can wrap anywhere between 15 and 100 winds of coil. What this allows me to do is I can have a 3,000 wind coil or a 5,000 winding coil, and yet my coils don't get taller or longer than 6 inches. The coil you'll see here on the screen is 6 inches, so it's the biggest coil that I've wrapped. And when you're watching the video clips of how these coils perform, please know that these are very small coils, even though they're throwing out 10, 12, and 18-inch lightning bolts. Also, one more real quick tip. Because I deal with, I buy wire, magnet wire in bulk, I went to the thrift store and picked up a record turntable, and then I center this 20-pound spindle of wire, and it takes like milliounces to wind my coil. No strain at all. So I'll just put in my favorite YouTube channel, one of Nathan's videos, and I'll start winding. Next slide. So once I've wound the coil, I place it into a form so that it's ready to be poured in epoxy. Next slide. Once that the epoxy has been vacuumed, so the bubbles are removed, I then give it about 3 days to cure, and then I'll open it up to remove the form. The form doesn't stick because I use Vaseline, and the epoxy does not adhere to the Vaseline. And so then inside, what you have is a Tesla coil. This here, the one you're seeing here, has 5,000 turns of wire. It's only 6 inches long, and yet it is completely infused with 2-part epoxy with no bubbles. Next slide. This is a picture of it. You can kind of see that there's a slit on one side of the coil, and this allows me to, once I've completed one ring of windings, I can then switch to the next ring, and then to the next ring, and so on. And so that's what you're seeing here. Next slide. Here I'm kind of rolling it because it's really hard to see with the photos, but it's completely translucent. You can see just the it's like almost like a sculpture, the way the light refracts inside, and it almost looks like gold. So there's an aesthetic quality of winding these that I love. Next slide. Now we're going to get to the Death Star. So I've applied the same principles to the cylinders that I've wound to a sphere. And so here you could see a grooved sphere. And also I'll mention this, every object that I wind in this way has 100 grooves. And that just makes it real easy to now know your turns. So if I put, let's say 25 windings per groove, at the end when I'm done, it's going to be 2,500 windings of wire. I'll have to give a shout out, Brian Brum. He's a CAD genius, and he's helped me so much in getting these 3D prints. Next slide. Again, now you can kind of see inside what it looks like. Next slide. So this took quite a bit of time to hand wind. My eyes kept going cross-eyed because I would end up with the sphere playing sort of optical illusions on me. But I was able to complete it. And the end total was 3,000 turns of wire, and the diameter is 4 inches. Next slide. Now it's time to put it in the form. The reason why the form is multicolored is that I kept running out of filament in my printer. So basically it started out red, and then I ran out of red, put blue, then I ran out of blue, and then went to green. So it's colorful, but not on purpose. Next slide. Here it is, ready for the vacuum chamber. Next slide. Here, when I've peeled it away and taken it out of the vacuum chamber and I clean it up, it's having that amazing translucent clear coating, bubble-free straight through the sphere. And you can see that the sphere is fitting in one hand, so it's about twice the diameter of a billiard ball. Next slide. Here are all the parts that I'm going to put together. So if you want to screenshot this or watch this later and screenshot, it's really simple. The ZBS coil, a couple alligator clips, some 1/4 inch, plumbing copper wire, and some capacitors, and you're ready to go. I put the lighter in there, but you can't really see it to try to give you scale, but the lighter is 3 inches and the ball's 4 inches. So just to show you how this is not that big. Next slide. When I first started testing the sphere, I had to, if you could see that right there, when it discharges on the primary coil, that's actually a bad thing, even though it looks really cool. And what's happening is that the plasma discharge is just bursting through the 2-part epoxy and grounding itself out on the secondary coil. And that's just not desirable because it'll start burning up all my work. But it looks pretty cool while you're setting it up. The flashes that you're seeing there is the vaporizing of the epoxy at temperatures that equal the surface of the sun. You can actually Google that. Plasma is a pretty awesome, powerful thing. But this is what an untuned working prototype looks like before it gets tuned. Next slide. And so we're going to start now watching videos of it as I begin to tune it. And when I say tuning it, what I mean is I'm bringing it to the resonant frequency of the sphere. The sphere's resonant frequency is 101 kilohertz. And so what I do is I try to adjust the capacitance, those capacitors over there on the left, to get as close as I can with the primary coil to equal the secondary coil's resonance. Now, what you're seeing here is you're seeing about 1/3 to a quarter to a third the size of the Death Star, and that is what is called a quasi-continuous wave. Quasi-continuous wave is my favorite output because it's just real fluffy. It's really intense. When I first tested this, I was about 10 inches away, 12 inches away, and it singed my eyebrows. And the video doesn't do it justice. There's just so much power coming from this continuous wave. We're looking at about 7 or 8 amps, and it's just incredible. Also, too, I'll show you later, but when I take an infrared picture of the ZVS, the MOSFETs are cool. Okay, so nothing's overheating on this circuit. And the only thing that's overheating is that if you walk in proximity to that continuous wave output, man, it's just amazingly powerful. Next slide. So now this input is different than the previous input. The previous was just a DC input. This input is an AC input where I use one diode in order to partially rectify the AC. And so what's the input is just a bunch of, it's a pulsing DC. What's fascinating about this one is it has a completely different discharge. Instead of the big fluffy ball, it basically outputs these very fractal-like lightning structures. It's hard to see in here, but we'll see it a little bit. But the diameter of these arcs are about 3 times the diameter of the Death Star, and that's amazing. It's also doing something that I didn't expect, doing the opposite of, I guess, our intuition. And what it's doing is the more I tune it, the more I get it closer to the secondary resonant frequency, the less radiant energy it has to power up anything wirelessly. So, you've seen the TeslaCoils where they'll take a little neon bulb and they'll bring it over to the TeslaCoil and it'll light up. The more I tune this Death Star, this sphere, the less you can light up those neon light bulbs. It's working so efficiently, this little ball of wire, that it is pushing out all of its energy out through the arcs and sparks, as you're seeing here. And I'll give you an example of that here in one of the future clips. Next slide, please. This is a bit tough to see. Let me see here from my screen. Okay, so I'm just going to provide some clips just to kind of show you how the more I fine tune it, and I'll explain to you later what fine tuning is, more and more power is coming out of it. Now, if you notice, there was some sort of lightning bolts coming out of the fluff. One of the things about these TeslaCoils is that when you start cranking up the voltage, what will happen is that you'll reach a point where there'll be maximum spark output. And then if you go past that point and add more power to it, it'll actually start reducing again. So that's interesting to me. You would think that it would just keep growing until something blew up, but that's not the case. So once I get it to about 40, 45 volts, all of a sudden, if I hit 50, 55 volts, it starts shrinking again. And so that's another phenomenon that I wanted to share here that's very interesting because I didn't expect it to be doing that. Next slide. And I appreciate everybody's patience. We're about halfway through, and then it'll be wonderful to take questions. This is just a continuous wave that you can see with the lights on, so you can kind of get an idea. Next slide, please. Now, this is another phenomenon that I did not expect. I placed my cell phone about 4 inches above the arcs. and my cell phone worked perfectly, and it didn't short out into my cell phone. In fact, I was just standing over this, watching it, and I could feel no real electrical effects. Now, if you were to try this with a conventional Tesla coil, first thing that would happen is that your phone would at least stop operation. It would at least freeze up. And that's if you didn't fry it. Also, too, you would find that these little lightning bolts would probably want to come and touch you and let you know you're there. But for some reason, I can just stand over it completely. My phone's about 4 inches away, and yet I can enjoy the display and not be affected. And again, it has to do with something of the geometry of that sphere. It's so efficient that it's either absorbing all the radiant energy and putting it into the confined output, or it's doing something else that I haven't discovered yet. And I'll love to hear your opinions when we get to the end here. Next slide. This is, again, the same phenomenon, but as I tune it, you can see that they're getting bigger and bigger. At its biggest, I'm able to throw it arcs about 3 times the diameter of the sphere, which is pretty cool. Next slide, please. So again, let's see. Yep, so more tuning. So you're seeing it a little bit better, a little bit more output. We'll talk about tuning again in here in a little bit. I just don't get tired of these. Maybe you guys are, so maybe we'll rush through them. But these are just so fascinating to me. All right, next video or next clip, please. So they're just getting a little bit bigger as I tune. Next slide, please. Now, this coil is only 4 inches high. And I'll tell you what, this thing is incredibly powerful. It has 2,500 windings. It's set in epoxy like my other designs. And you can see that it just lights up this argon vacuum tube. Very cool. Next slide, please. Now, I'm putting the sphere literally right on that same coil. That same tube. And look, it has no effect. The output of the Death Star has no effect on that tube, while my little 4-inch cylinder was lighting up that tube. Now again, it has to do with something about the sphere is perfectly containing all of the energy and then putting it out efficiently. And so it's not exciting any other thing other than the arc discharge that you're seeing here. It's like an illusion here, but literally the output needle, that copper needle, is almost touching it, and yet it has no effect. Next slide. All right, so can we make this bigger or? Thank you. And so here's an infrared picture of the Death Star. You can see that everything is relatively cool, except for the 2 inductive chokes. And that's good. Those inductive chokes are rated at 15 amps. I'm putting in about 7. So they're expected to get warm. But left of those chokes are the MOSFETs. And you can't even see them in infrared. That's how cool they are. This is the temperature of the circuits that are powering those giant arcs that you're seeing. This is so fascinating. Next slide, please. Okay, so I've finally been able to solve the mystery of the ZVS high voltage oscillator. how can I then teach others how to build what I've built? So what I've done is I've created a 3-step process. If you follow these 3 steps, you can get your ZVS to power any geometry, any kind of coil configuration that you can imagine, and you will get high voltage arcs. That is how cool the ZVS is. So this really is step 1. Now you're going to need some equipment. This might be cost prohibitive for some. My equipment I buy very inexpensive on Amazon. I don't spend a lot of money. So, for example, this oscilloscope's about $350. This signal generator's $100, and that power supply, 60 volts, 24 amps. It's a beast. Is the most expensive power supply I have. It's $260. These are all on Amazon, easy to find. But what you do is you connect them in a certain way to your secondary coil, as you can see on the right, and you're going to connect it with a resistor. And then what you're going to do is you're going to sweep with different frequencies until you have the minimum amplitude on your oscilloscope. Once you get the minimal amplitude on your oscilloscope after sweeping between about 10 kilohertz and 1 megahertz, that is your resonant frequency. I wrote it on the side of the blue coil here, and then I went to step 2. Next slide, please. Step 2 is, you can see there's my primary coil, coil 1. I hook it up to my LCR meter so I can get the inductance. So now I have the resonant frequency, and now I have the inductance. Now we go to step 3. Next slide, sorry. And so in the highlighted yellow, I put in the values, 201 kilohertz for the resonant frequency of the blue coil, 5.6 microhenries for the primary coil. And now this calculator gives me the answer. I need 57 nanofarads. And so what I'll do is I'll put 57 nanofarads, and now I have a powerful Tesla coil that's safe to put on your desk. You won't need hearing protection, and it won't be pumping out ozone, and yet you can perform all of your plasma experiments. So this is basically step 3. Next slide. Instead of buying every different kind of value capacitors, I basically solder them in different ways. And so then when I put them across my meter, I get different values. So this little cluster of capacitors, if I connect them in a certain way, I can get 214 nanofarads, 55 nanofarads, 73, 109, and 44. So this is a way to kind of get a variable capacitor without buying an expensive variable capacitor. Is just to, again, just connect them in certain configurations. Next slide. Once I find a value of a capacitor that resonates with my ZVS Tesla coil, what I'll do is to get more power, I'll configure more capacitors by soldering them together in series and in parallel. So that way they have the same value as a single capacitor, and yet you can push a lot more power through them. So what you're looking at here is the single capacitor on the right is the exact same value as the group of 6 capacitors on the left, and that's because they're connected in series and parallel. So this is very, very useful tip when you're trying to get resonant frequency on your ZVS Tesla coil. Next slide. What was really cool is I needed 331 nanofarads for the sphere, and all of my capacitor configurations didn't have that value. So I just flipped over one of my groups of soldered capacitors, and I just started connecting my capacitor meter, and lo and behold, I found in this connection display, I have the exact 331 nanofarads that I needed. So this is just a really cool trick. So you don't have to buy all kinds of capacitors. It's just solder them together and check out all the cool values you can get out of them, and then use the values that you need. Next slide. This is what is called a capacitor calculator. So if you don't want to solder them all together to figure out what their values are, just throw them in these calculators and connect them in series and parallel. And then you'll be able to figure out how you can get the capacitive value that you need. And so again, you don't have to buy new capacitors. You can just connect them in creative ways and get the values that you need. Next slide. These are my two favorite capacitors. So if you want to go back and watch the video, there's a lot of reasons why I use these capacitors. They're very cheap, but they're very powerful. And that's a very difficult combination to find. If you're going to find awesome capacitors, usually going to pay a premium. You'll pay $3, $5, $10 a capacitor. I paid 80 cents for the capacitor on the right and a little over $1 on the one on the left. And so people who build these things know how cheap that is for the quality. Next slide. Now, this is one of my moving forward inventions. What you're seeing here is a spool of rectangular wire. And so I'm going to take the same groove design, but instead of putting in the normal round magnetic wire, I'm going to take a very thin but very wide rectangular wire in order to get about 5 to 6 times the current into the same geometry. What you've seen so far is from 3 to about 9 amps at being the highest. This little coil is going to be handling something like 50 amps. And so what's going to come out of this, I don't even know, but I can't wait. Next slide. So how I cheat the system is it's 32 gauge in width, but it's like 12 gauge in oh my goodness, I got it reversed. It's 32 gauge in thickness, and then it's about 12 gauge in width. So what you're seeing here is about 55 turns of 32 gauge wire, even though it can manage 5 times the current. So I'll be putting out a video on that soon. Next slide. I'm also working on a new geometry. So I'm going to go from the sphere to the toroid. Now, the sphere seems to not allow electric charge outside its boundaries. So I'm kind of wondering if the toroid won't let magnetic lines out of its geometry. Either way, this thing is going to be really cool when I can get it working, and I'll definitely have a video for that as well. And again, I put the big glider in there to just get scale. The stuff I work on is not very big, even though it looks big. The only thing big are the plasma arc discharges, which is why I love these designs. Next slide, please. And there it is put together, and it's going to be harder to wind than the sphere. So next slide. If you recall, this is the 5,000 winding coil that I had submerged in epoxy resin and then vacuum chambered the bubbles. The inductance of this coil is so high that it doesn't even show up on my LCR meter. I think my LCR meter can go up to Henry's, and also to the Q factor on this coil. I mean, it's I've seen my meter go up as high as 1500 Q quality factor. This thing is off the charts. So this thing's going to be really interesting to see. It's not bigger than the other coils, it's 6 inches, but wow, the inductance on this thing is off the charts, which I believe is going to relate to powerful discharges. Next slide. So when I'm winding the primary coil, I like to try different geometries as well. Nathan was keen in seeing this in one of my videos. So what you're seeing here is 12 gauge magnet wire, and I wound it into sort of a spring-like configuration. And so this here now fits in a 3-inch diameter primary setup, but yet it's about 25 feet of 12 gauge wire. And so what I was trying to do here is to just maximize the inductance in the primary without it increasing the space. Unfortunately, in testing, using this as the primary is not a good idea. The back EMF, the flyback effects, it just eddy currents, it just heats this thing up. This thing gets hot to touch. And in all of the Tesla coils I've ever built, I've never had a primary even get warm. This primary gets too hot to touch. So it was a concept, and it just gives you an idea of some of the concepts I try. We'd be here all day if I showed you all my configurations, but this is one of my creative ones. Next slide. So this is another thing I'm going to be building. It has 8 MOSFETs instead of 2. It has those giant cooling fans because it's actually going to need it, because for that rectangular wire, it's going to need some serious amperage. And so this will handle the 50 amps that I want to put into that, that new coil. Next slide. This was my second iteration of that grooved coil design. And I kept having discharges from the side breaking through the epoxy. And so I decided, you know what, I'm just going to put an inch thick wall of epoxy around this coil, and I'm going to stop it from discharging from the side. And you know what happened? It still discharged from the side. I still had plasma breaking right through a solid inch of epoxy. So just to give you an idea of how powerful these sparks are for these for the size of these coils. Next slide. This is just now a little bit of miscellaneous, and we're almost done. I appreciate your all patience. I go to thrift stores primarily for all of my storage bins, and I buy everything in clear acrylic. And then I store everything where you can see through them. And this helps a lot because I'm a very disorganized person. But also, too, I'll grab one of these and use them as the primary coil for my TeslaCoils. So there's a lot you can do when you go into the kitchen section of a thrift store. Next slide. This is what so you see 29 volts, and it goes down to 2 volts. Now 24 amps. Now it goes to 29 volts, and then it goes to 2 volts and 24 amps. Okay, I think it's going to do it one more time. 29 volts down to 2.5 volts, 24 amps, and then back to 29 volts. The reason why I want to show you this is because this means your ZVS is not working. You need to see the 29 volts stay. Okay. If you see the voltage drop like this, it's one of 2 issues. One, it's not oscillating, and you're just going to fry your board. Okay. So you want to stop it when it goes down in voltage. So that's what it means. It's not oscillating. Or 2, you blew a MOSFET. Then it's just going to read 2 volts because a MOSFET acts like a short. It's like a 2 ohm resistor. And so I just thought this was cool because I didn't know this when I was setting up the ZVS, and this really troubleshoots most of your problems. When you see this drop down, it's a MOSFET, maybe a diode, or it's not oscillating. Next slide. I don't think that's my slide. Oh, we're done. I think this is Nathan's. Well, thank you for your patience, everybody. I'm open to take questions at this time.
And bring everybody in. Go ahead, guys. That I can't even put words to that, man. That was so
Yeah,
awesome.
that was.
I think we should
It was
give him
a
a
great
round of applause.
presentation.
That was awesome.
Yeah, natural
Thank you,
presenter.
guys. It means a lot.
That was great.
You know, it takes
Appreciate
a lot of courage to get up here and present like that, and you just did it like without hesitation. I love it. We got a couple of
Thank
questions
you.
from chat. Yeah. We got a question here from Brendan who wants to know, is there a ZVS driver and a plasma TV that he's looking for one?
So when people think ZVS, they tend to think that it's going to have that TV flyback setup. And then once the ZVS powers the ZVS flyback transformer that are in TV sets, then that output's going to go to some spark gap Tesla coil. The ZVSs that I'm using, they don't use that flyback transformer that are in TV sets. And so because of that, I just skip that step and just go straight to the Tesla coil.
Okay, nice. We got another question from Tammy who wants to know, how thick is the epoxy? I think she was referring to your Death Star coil or the coil before that in your presentation.
Good question. So rule of thumb, I try to keep 1 millimeter of thickness, except for that red coil. I just was tired of plasma breaking out the sides, and that's when I put the inch thick of epoxy, and it didn't help. But generally, it's 1 millimeter thick.
1 millimeter. We got one more quick question from Sue Spectacular, who asked, what are your thoughts on harnessing this energy in a manageable, practical way? She's a mechanical engineer and loves designing practical, usable, material-based items.
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think once you get a lot of plasma on your desk and you start testing it in different ways, I don't think we've really bottomed out on our knowledge of plasma. I just don't think we have. So, so practical purposes with plasma, great question. See, I just set the goal for my Tesla coils here to reach 1 million volts. I haven't really thought past that yet. I do, I do know. Thumbs up. Yeah, we'll be doing another video if you guys are interested when I hit 1 million.
Oh, heck yeah.
I might be wearing red underwear, but we'll do it.
I don't know if you read my comments on the last show, but I'm looking for 1.25 for a specific project. Me and you should talk.
Sure. Be glad to.
That'd be awesome.
Sounds good. Oh, egg-shaped coil. Not yet. It does sound cool. I have a whole list of geometries that I want to build. So good idea. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm looking to build a sphere with a hourglass shape in the middle, and the sphere covers everything, and it's all coil. I have the design. I attempted it once, but I need a 3D printer to build the scaffolding properly in order to have this work. Because it's a tough wind the way I do it. It's not.
Yeah, you definitely gotta have some kind of frame.
Yeah.
Sounds very cool. Sounds interesting. Yeah, I'd love to collaborate with you. I'm really impressed with your stuff. So that would be wonderful.
And likewise, your idea for the way you did Tesla coils, outside the box, amazing. Like my mind was blown. That's how we have to do these things. We have to think completely differently than what was done. Let's add some crazy stuff to it, and as Nathan always says, try it, find it. Right?
Right.
So,
You know, it's so funny.
So I have to quickly jump into in regards to the egg-shaped coils, the Keshi KFSSI Foundation, their anti-gravity coil or propulsion coil is a giant egg-shaped coil design or geometry with their star setup, which is like 3 or 6 of the monoatomic Ormus things spinning in the middle. But then the egg coil is actually several like triple solenoid coils, but of egg 3 coils within coils within coils, all egg shapes going around in a bigger egg shape shell around the spinning monoatomic. So
Wow,
fascinating.
I'd love to see that.
And that's the one video that like I saw like 5 or 6 years ago. Some member was like reproduced it, I think, in like Vancouver, the west coast of Canada, and he lit it up on one of the live Zooms, and it actually like produced a glowing plasma field from what we saw like on the Zoom, and then it's like I have never been able to find that video since.
Oh no, I've been there.
I got an interview upcoming with Mehran Keshi, so I'm going to ask him about that and see if they can line it up for that.
Awesome. Thanks for sharing. Ben, do you mind reading some more questions?
Yeah. So we got one question here. Is there any configuration of a ZVS driver that can produce current impulses, like half wave, single polarity direction, or is it only able to work usefully with resonance in both polarities?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I know the flyback transformer out of TVs has the high voltage diodes on the output. So it definitely produces sort of like a quarter or half wave polarity. I haven't tried it yet. I know that SciTube HD tried throwing a high voltage diode right on top of his Tesla coil breakout. And then he does readings. So I don't know if that might answer your question. Again, it's SciTube, like science, SCI, tube, HD. And if, oh, thank you. Oh, that's my wife. Thank you, sweetie.
Support from home, right? That's the best part. Like,
yeah,
that's awesome.
Thank you.
He's a great guy, and he has amazing tech. He's going to be able to revolutionize Tesla coils, and I say that with full confidence.
Absolutely.
Sorry to interrupt. Go ahead.
No, not at all. I'm glad you chimed in. Yeah, SciTube HD collaborated with Archangel. Now, Archangel deserves a lot of credit as well. In fact, when I saw them, they were my inspiration to go to what you guys have seen now today.
Nice. I follow them as well.
It was
Awesome.
so
That's
funny.
really crazy.
Ben asked me today, do I need to prep for anything or look up anything? I said it won't help.
Yeah.
It just won't help. Yeah.
It's crazy
so far
though,
out of the
but
box.
we're all kind of like onto something in our respective like areas, and coming together on this show is amazing. Having Shawn on here, it's really an honor.
Bring together the best minds in the world of all you garage geniuses and builders, and then it's like you're all sharing, like, and it's like, oh yeah, I've seen that effect. Oh yeah, I know that effect, right? And then it's like everybody's factor of understanding is just growing exponentially. It's a wonderful thing.
Yes. Hey, and I just want to say I love your background. All your
yeah, it's nice.
art. It's so
Nathan
cool.
picked that. Yeah,
Hey,
he did a great job with this.
Oh, thank you. By the way, I think I know why your coil wasn't attacking that cylinder.
Okay.
If you noticed, you had swirls in it.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And it looks like you're sucking in the energy, not pushing it out. So it's swirling in, it looked like. I don't know if you noticed that.
Oh, I have to look at it again. Wow.
Yeah, I'll put it up in here a little bit when you're done with some questions. We'll take a look at it as a group and see if it's doing that or something else.
Awesome. I see a question. When you're epoxying, are you also doing in vacuum? Might fix the arcing issue. So how I vacuum the epoxy is I have a Verver generic vacuum generator or vacuum pump, and it looks like a 5-gallon tin pot for canning, but it has a thick clear lid. And so what I do is when I mix the epoxy, I then take that container that I mixed, put it in there, and then I crank the vacuum, watch all the bubbles come out. I'll free it up, release the vacuum, then vacuum it again, and then release it, vacuum it again. I'll do that 3 times. And then I'll pull in my form for my Tesla coil, and then I'll pour that into the form, and then I do 3 more vacuum rounds with that. So there's really nothing left by the time I'm letting the epoxy set. Does that make sense?
You said there's no air bubbles or anything.
Yes, if you look deep inside it, it's just amazing how clear. Yeah, there's my setup. There's the pot, and there's the colorful form where the sphere is inside.
That's cool.
And yeah, it's vacuum pumping is fun. I don't know why.
So I got a question. How long does it take from the beginning of the process of vacuuming to the time you allow it to set? Do you know?
Yeah, good question. Yeah. The two-part epoxy that I use basically hardens in about an hour or two. It gets really hot, almost hot to touch.
Oh yeah.
And 24 hours, it's hard, but you could probably bend it a little bit, a little jiggly. So really I think it takes 2 weeks to fully cure.
Within those 24 hours, the next coil we build, I got a little suggestion for you.
Okay.
Once it's at the point where it's a little jiggly, start pulsing it. You might actually create yourself an electret.
Interesting. Oh, that's a really good idea.
Yeah, it'd be a really neat experiment. That's what I want to do on my next system. But again, I got a lot going on, so when I get to it. But please, I hope you do it first, because then I may not have to, or I may just take instruction from you by far.
Sure.
Yeah,
Dang.
so sorry to interrupt though, but yeah, that's awesome.
Thank you.
Is there any other questions out there?
We're open for questions, everybody.
Sorry, I just emailed the link to Charlie and Jared Yates and a couple more to see if they want to hop in and ask any other questions on this too, because I know we're all working for the same goal here with the Gravify and understanding what a Tesla coil truly is, right? It's remarkable, Shawn, what you've discovered and built here, and you're demonstrating with it.
I appreciate that.
I have a question.
Sure.
So you said you work on intuition, and like a lot of us here, do you have any sort of inspiration for your design for the Death Star coil, or what you're doing with these Tesla coils, or did you have a dream or a vision? Because I know a lot of us here have had dreams or visions that have guided us in our work.
Yeah, that's a really good idea. I guess I say that I try to approach it intuitively because I don't want to get bogged down with math, or I don't want to get bogged down with terminology. So, you build 100 Tesla coils like I have that don't work. And then all of a sudden you get into this groove where you know what you need to do, and you can kind of put away the calculator. What inspired me to make these geometric condensed coils was more of I just thought Tesla coils were ugly and loud, and I didn't want them around me. I just thought, but I want to be in my lab and play with them, and they're just, oh my goodness, you gotta put them in your garage or out in your yard, and you need to wear earring protection. And so that was really what it was, more of practicality that necessitated this. And a little fun fact, so Tesla coil, there's a Tesla Coil Association. I don't know if you've heard of it, or foundation. And it's basically a group of the top coilers in the country. They have these 15-foot, 20-foot Tesla coils. They travel and do shows. So
I think I've seen some of those videos.
Yeah, I believe Jeremiah Pop may have been part of that in the beginning. I'm not sure, but I know he built some really crazy coils. So
I also suspect they might be a part of the Beakerhead Science Festival in Calgary that is every year, where they have big Tesla coils set up, and might be part of that with what you're describing.
Yeah, interesting. Yes. And these guys are the pros. You go to their websites. I mean, they tell you everything about a Tesla coil. So I reached out to one of them, and I basically inquired of my designs that you guys saw here, just some of my designs. And the answer was, don't do it. They'll never work. There's a reason why we do it the way we do it. And I thought, that's another reason why I wanted to build these, was just sort of necessity. And also I kind of felt like there's a challenge there, a guy who knows way more than me. And
can I say something on that? If I had a nickel for every time somebody said that to me, I'd be a millionaire today. I'm telling you. I don't listen to people's negative. To me, it's like when they say, don't do this, it won't work. Well, I'm definitely going to do it because I want to see how it doesn't work.
Exactly.
Right? So that's the way to go, man. Awesome.
I got to point out, Jack Serfati, he stated that he himself wants to be described as an intuitive genius, right? That it's
Jack Serfati is a schmuck. I'm just kidding.
Right? I almost made his schmuck list the last time I was on with him, but I held it together. And
I like Jack, but his ego's bigger than the screen. So
everybody's building TeslaCoils, and Shawn's building a TeslaCoil 2.0 over here. He's officially upgraded the Tesla coil.
I'm sorry, Ben. I disagree. He's building like
I got someone
a brand new system. You think it's beyond a Tesla 2.0?
Yeah, appreciate it, guys.
But you get the idea, though. Everybody's building the same old thing, and he's going to another level. So
yeah, thank you.
That's the analogy here that's important.
I just wanted to say, Jack, if you're listening, you're great. I'm just messing with you. Now you're on the schmuck list, okay? I'm just kidding. Go ahead.
Oh, just real quick, my wife chimed in and said I get inspiration when we talk, and yeah,
we love you, Jack.
My biggest inspiration.
That's awesome, brother.
Thanks.
Awesome.
32 years of marriage.
Oh, nice.
Good for you. That's great.
Thanks.
So let's take a look at this real quick. Here it is. We're just going to zoom it in. You see the swirls right here?
Yes.
And they look like they go down. Swirl again and go down. I might be crazy, but it looks like it's pulling it in versus pushing it out. And it could very well just be breaking out of there like this.
Wow. Good catch.
But there's something going on here in the way it's, you know what I mean, going down.
Yeah.
So you can see it, boom, and then it goes. It almost looks like it's like a drain tube.
Right. They do. I never noticed that. And what are you guys' thoughts on my camera, my phone being 4 inches away from these 12-inch high voltage arcs?
That's insane.
You had your amps
Maybe
very well controlled.
To do with cold electricity. Huh? What'd you say, Mike?
Well, it can't. The thing is, if it's pulling it in from everywhere else, then you shouldn't have anything. That would be the coolest thing if you could verify that.
Wow.
But,
yeah.
It might be some kind of cold electricity. I don't know. Cold electricity.
No. It's pulling in from the area around it, right? So if the TeslaCoil is pulling in instead of pushing out like we all think it is, it would be a whole big discovery to find out if it's swirling in, and then we just didn't have it high enough to find it.
Here's a thought for you. Were you holding your phone when you recorded that 4 inches above?
Yes.
So if it's pulling energy, just a thought, maybe it's pulling energy from the ground through your phone, and that's why your phone is still operating.
Oh, you're grounded?
That's interesting.
Well, just standing on the ground, right?
Well, so I have a very thick plastic coating under my lab, so I'm never grounded. And I also wear these thick rubber shoes, but that's an interesting theory. My theory was, and let me know what you guys think. In order to test or measure high voltage, it gets real difficult because let's say you have two probes 1 inch apart. When the high voltage breaks the barrier to one probe to the other, it establishes then a connection of plasma, and then the resistance ends up being very low. And so in my reading, the solution to measuring it accurately is to have two spheres, because a sphere will equally distribute the charge on both spheres. So when it actually does break the arc, it's going to be a lot harder. It's going to be more representatory of the actual voltage. And so what my thinking was with the sphere is that it so evenly distributes the charge that it's not allowing that charge outside or past the sphere. And so therefore, you're not getting that field that lights up neon bulbs and other fluorescent lights. And that's my theory.
Charge compression.
Yeah, like Nathan said, it's going inward, not pushing outward.
That's amazing. Good catch.
That's
Yeah.
wow.
Yeah, that helped me understand it actually. What he said. Because honestly, this is a little above me until he said that. I'm like, oh, okay.
Nice.
Yeah, that, you know what? You could use that for the. Oh, we have to do a Zoom behind the scenes, and I bet you we could come up with something and build something that's never been seen before, because that could be literally the heart of a system for a whole ship.
Sounds awesome. I would love to collaborate on that.
That would be amazing.
Yeah, at your service, sir. I'd love to help.
We got some more questions here,
Great.
if you don't mind.
Yep, I'll back out of here.
Sure.
No, it's all good. Question, guys: Has anyone you guys know made a particle accelerator any size?
I've only heard of Bob Lazar supposedly making one in his backyard to run his solar-powered hydrogen car or something. But
I
that's
think
a Bob
microwave
Lazar
cyclotrons
story.
do the same thing.
Yeah, Russ Grease built the EPG, and that's essentially a low-level particle accelerator. So maybe I haven't though. I mean, it's great.
Here's another question. Oh, sorry. Here's another question. How do you intend to wind the toroid? Is it a spiral or circular wind?
I think it has to be a spiral because it has to move through the entire toroid. So the circular idea is interesting if you created 100 rings instead of 100 spiral windings, but then you would have to figure out how to connect those 100 rings in that toroid shape. I have a theory here I'd love to run by you guys. If the sphere holds charge equally, and Mike could probably help answer this because he knows transformers. A toroid transformer doesn't allow the magnetic lines to escape. It efficiently contains all the magnetic lines. What if my toroid does the opposite of the sphere? The sphere doesn't allow electric charge leave, whereas the toroid won't let out magnetic lines of force.
Like the opposite effect.
Yeah, the sphere would be the opposite of the toroid because
it makes sense.
Step back a little bit.
Sense.
You said something about this. Is the sphere also iron?
So just the toroid. If I'm going to wrap the toroid like you would wrap a toroid transformer, but yet I'm going to use that toroid as a Tesla coil. So
to give a little context,
transformer will
trying to get
contain
an
the
understanding of what you're saying, Shawn, like, are you referring to kind of how like Bob Grenier in his donut coil, or that the inner wire is like iron or ferrite and then it's copper on the outside sort of field effects? Or
I see. Yeah, that's a good question. So as soon as you add, let's say, any kind of core to a Tesla coil secondary, you're reducing its frequency range to a maximum of 25 kilohertz. And after that, what happens is that metal core, whether it be iron or ferrite, whatever you want to put in as a core, it begins to saturate. And then you start losing power significantly. And I haven't seen a 25 kilohertz Tesla coil, but it would be interesting because that is definitely low frequency. But these are air core, and I'm using the 3D print as just a guide to guide the wire.
Air core is the best. You can get the highest frequencies, and anomalies seem to come out of them a little bit differently than what Bob Grenier's, I can't remember what he called it, toroid coil.
No, the donut. What, no, is it the donut?
Donut coil? I can't remember.
Right?
It does some
I don't
crazy stuff, too,
remember.
but it wouldn't reach the high frequencies that Shawn's talking about or that we're trying to intend to get to. So I get that. That was an awesome answer to that question, Shawn. I'll shut up now.
No, it's great. No, I love the input. Good
Right. So the
question.
ferrite core doesn't work because as it heats, it loses the magnetic field. Correct. That's what is disrupting the power, as you're saying.
I mean, it will heat, but it'll slow down the frequency response of the magnetic field as it builds up and contracts. It'll begin to work against it, and it'll definitely get hot.
What about something like a bismuth aluminum agglomeration?
Whoa, hold on. You guys know about the Thane-Heinz transformer? That thing redirects the extra flux that creates that heat.
Bagel coil. That's what it is. My bad. Bagel, not donut. Not donut.
Oh,
Bagel
smear
coil.
me.
The Thane Heinz.
Gerald knows about the Thane-Heinz, right?
Yeah, it's amazing actually. I took my 1-inch coil and I made like a closed in H bar of ferric cores, and I had 3 pickup coils, and I just pulsed my primary on this little vortex 1-inch coil I had, and I was lighting a bunch of LEDs. I think I was getting like 64 volts on one coil, and
Wow.
yeah, you just
Yeah, that's
redirect
cool.
your magnetics in order to use your electrostatics in that system. My understanding.
The picture of the Thane-Heinz transformer is basically 2 square iron cores. One is thicker than the other, and they're put together at one of each of their arms. And
Yeah.
The thicker side takes the excess flux, and you're supposed to draw it off with a coil so it don't build.
How do you spell that?
Thane-Heinz? I don't know exactly. I keep spelling it wrong too.
I'll just get close.
It's there. I mean, it's on the YouTube everywhere. I think
Sounds
it is.
cool. Sounds cool. Thank you.
Thane, Thane, or Thane?
I don't know.
I'll
Yeah.
Google it. Thank
The
you.
bitorial. Is it the bitorial? No, the transformer bitorial? No. Sorry, no, it's
Bipolar. Bipolar.
Thane-Heinz, just search Thane-Heinz transformer. Maybe that's what he's known for, is that
It's
transformer.
THANE, and then it's HEIN bitoroid transformer.
Hein.
I'm just
There you
writing it down. Thank you so much. I'll have to look at it. Very cool.
I've never messed with that, but I looked at it and I really like the idea.
Yeah.
Let's see what Gerald's got going on over here.
He's drawing the Thane-Heinz transformer. Right. This is an awesome concept for many avenues of experiments for redirecting flux in the iron. But like Gerald said, without the iron flux, you could speed up your frequency because the iron flux is kind of, slowing down stuff. If you can't get rid of the flux fast enough, it will. It will build up and slow down your frequency and, kind of push back.
Yeah, I was building my own flyback transformers, and I love the way you put a ferrite core in there, and it increases the inductance 10 times. It increases the efficiency, and it's wonderful. It's almost like a magnetic lines of flux amplifier. But then once I started bringing it up into frequencies for the Tesla coil, it was a disaster. It just stopped working.
Also in the private chat, I put
There's ways of
something
winding
looking
the solenoid back and forth. I wish I knew the name or the video, but I watched it in one of the Periscope like 50s or 60s videos that literally showed them like winding the copper around the iron like a different manner, like over top of itself or back around a couple times. There's like a couple different ways, but it was like then they explained each way of how it like circumvented those issues, sort of thing. If that makes
That's
sense.
a really cool idea.
Shawn is your name? Shawn? Was it Shawn?
Yes. Yes.
There's a guy named Holcomb Energy. Holcomb, I forgot his first name, but his company. Holcomb Energy Systems, he builds these like intricate iron core systems to do what you're saying, like to amplify the flux using the iron.
Wow, fascinating.
So that's kind of what this is. This is the Thane Hein replica I did. I put my vortex coil around 2 square ferrite cores.
Mm-hmm.
I had a wrap of 120 here, 120 here, 120 here. This one was just a capacitor to hold the flux. I didn't draw this right, but these are a series of LEDs and they lit up.
Okay.
And this core here, I didn't even put it on the board, but it had a series of LEDs that lit up as well. And my secondary was picking up voltage at 64 volts.
Wow, that's
And
amazing.
that was all from pulsing like 7 volts onto the primary.
Wow, the power of resonance. Wow.
So Thane Hein system redirects the magnetic energy inside the circuit itself and allows you to use the electrostatic and separate the two, so to speak.
Wow.
I was thinking, technically speaking, the iron is a flux capacitor.
Yeah.
Yeah. Everything has capacitance. Yeah, I can see that. Very cool.
That's
I have a
awesome.
lot to look up.
So, Shawn, I have something for you. This right here is your identification of the AC that's going in. Can you explain this?
Sure. So these are what I connect to the Variac, the red Variac that we all know and love. And what happens is, of course, it's AC output, so there's no red and black, but I just use red and black to make sure that I was doing the things that matched my model. So what you're seeing here is that when an AC sine wave comes in, it's going to clip the negative part of the sine wave. So all you're going to get is the positive. And so what happens is that when the red lead and the black lead are coming in to build the sine wave, those diodes clip the negative hump. So then only the positive hump comes through and meets at the Tesla coil. And that's why, so have you guys ever heard of a Tesla coil interrupter where you'll see the Tesla coil and it will stop and then blink on, blink off, blink on, blink off. It makes a popping sound. Pop, 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 pop. It's called an interrupter.
I've never heard of that. Yeah,
Me neither. Never seen it either. That's awesome.
Oh, wow. I'll do a little video on that. I don't know if you guys knew, just real quick side point. I have no YouTube channel, and I had no idea that Nathan was going to make that montage and throw me in the deep end of the pool. But I just want to let you guys know that I want to say thank you, Nathan. I rushed to at least change, so it's not a generic channel, and I'll be making videos of all of my inventions and how to build them. So yes, what you're just seeing here is I think it's called a quarter wave rectifier, but I'd have to Google it.
Nice.
That's the purpose of, and the reason why I have the diodes in parallel like that is because you can push more current through them. That's the only reason. So if you add things in parallel, it allows more current. If you put things in series, you can handle higher voltage.
So I'm not exactly sure what I'm seeing, although I know. Oh, okay. I'm just blind. I apologize.
What drove me nuts when I first looked at this is right here. These two diodes look backward. And I kept asking Shawn, are you sure they go that way? Because I was completely lost. I'm like, these look like they're going towards
It's a rectifier.
Stop the energy. Yeah.
Right.
Didn't understand it right.
It's a half bridge.
They're both going the same way, right?
Yeah.
No, opposite. Because you got to rectify the AC going one way and not coming back the other. He's trying to make
So they're doing this?
So it gets you positive humps instead of negative humps.
Right.
That does.
So a sawtooth wave, right?
It's not a sawtooth. It's a pure positive sine wave hump. And I just wanted to mention that what the Tesla coil is in effect doing is literally turning on quickly and turning off quickly at 60 hertz.
Mm.
And so it gives bursts, creating those long lightning bolt shapes because it has interruptions and bursts, interruptions and bursts. When I do pure DC, that's when you get that big white fluffy ball of pure power.
The way that
Well,
I
if
usually,
it's, I'm
The way
sorry, if it's positive instead of a negative, wouldn't that be phase shifting it?
AC has no polarity. It flips polarity each cycle.
yeah,
Correct. So I'm filtering out the negative polarity every time it flips.
There you go.
Is the-
Mm.
You guys are
the-
racking your brain now, huh?
Hey guys, hold on.
These
I
are great
just need to give a
questions.
shout out right now. Okay, Bog Irish. Everybody say hello to Ian.
Hey,
Ian.
Hi,
Who's
Ian.
Hey,
Hey,
Ian.
Ian came on the show, man. Totally awesome. Love that he's here.
Yeah, he's got some great geometries. He's definitely up there. I would say he's going to be doing something unique in the near future.
Yeah.
If he can get any more than unique that he's already done. The collaboration that's coming together here, I'm going to start taking it back 6 months building a ship. I was wrong. I'm going into 5 months or 4. We just need the resources. This is crazy cool. I love it.
I told you Shawn was good.
Thank you.
I
Appreciate
put
it.
on my little hat with my little propeller when he comes on and shows me something new. I spin it around and let him talk.
Yeah, you put a channel out there, Shawn. We'll fill it. We'll get a bunch of subscribers for you.
Appreciate that.
The way you were explaining it before with the energy, how it comes in and it kind of fills, and I usually explain it when I'm pulsing. When you turn a light on, like you flip the switch and the power fills the line and it turns the light bulb on. When you flip that switch off, all the power that's in that line races back faster than it did go in. I'm talking DC here.
Right.
At the same time, when we pulse our stuff and our different transformers, it kind of comes out the same way. So that was just my point.
That's a good point. Good point. Thanks for sharing. Ben, you mentioned a phase shift. Phase shifts occur with between the capacitor and the inductor. So the inductor is going to slow down current, whereas the capacitor is going to slow down voltage. And so if you compare the current and the voltage between the inductor and the capacitor, they're out of phase. You'll see that they're out of phase from each other. And so I don't know if that answers your question. And so I'll go a little bit further. So when the capacitor and the inductor have a AC signal and they begin to oscillate, a DC signal to come in and oscillate, when you achieve their resonant frequency is when they are completely undampened to release all the power that they can. And that's really what's occurring in all the Tesla coils, if that makes sense.
No, it does. That's actually, you went beyond answering the question and you clarified it fully. Thank you.
Yeah.
Sure.
Beyond sense. That's perfect. Perfect explanation.
Yeah. Thank you. I'll tell you what, guys, I watch you guys all the time, and I just thought, wow, to be around so many smart people. I told my wife it'll be good for me to be the dumbest guy in the room because they'll up my game.
Oh, don't even go there. You ain't getting out of this one, buddy.
Yeah.
We know how smart you are.
You're just a different aspect of the game. Like I was saying before, I like Mike does. He gets excited about how he's explaining things to me, and I get excited explaining things to him. We need different opinions and different angles to come at this, and by doing that, get this done quick.
Yeah,
so I like your style. It's awesome.
Thank you so much. So when I was going through some of the phenomenon, when the sphere was out of tune, I could light up a neon bulb about 3 feet away. I didn't share that in the presentation. It was a lot of content, but I didn't share that when it's not in tune, it tends to really radiate at distances for its size further than you would expect, because it's only a 4-inch ball. But yet 3 feet away is when I was seeing my little fluorescent lamp light up. But as I brought it into tune, I couldn't get anything to light up near the coil. So I was going to run that by you guys. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, that's weird. You see, so you tuned the coil and the lights went out.
You know how you do the wireless, hold the light bulb next to the Tesla coil and it lights up in your hand?
I've never replicated a coil, but I've seen many people do that. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. It did it further than your average coil when the coil was out of tune. And when I say out of tune, it was a frequency that was not close to its resonant frequency. And by the way, I haven't been able to tune my stuff within more than a 1,000 hertz range. So
Well,
I
there's a
still
lot
have
of harmonics
1
to
kilohertz.
it too, the resonant frequency.
Yeah, so I have a whole 1 kilohertz to still tune it, but there are a lot of variables in that. So I have to shorten all my leads, get everything as close as possible. I need really thick copper, so that way I don't have any antennas, no sharp edges. I can then get in that perfect tune. But out of tune, and it pumps out radiant energy. In tune, it's like a different Tesla coil.
So that's very interesting. I kind of wonder if when you were doing your resonant tuning and you were lighting neon, did you go further than 3 feet? Like say even 13, 12 and a half, 13 feet?
Oh, no, not that far. It was about 2 to 3 feet, when normally my small coils, if they're about a foot, 18 inches, because they're so small. You see people with a 2-foot Tesla coil, you're going to light up fluorescent bulbs on the other side of the room. But no, it surprised me that little sphere lit up things with radiant energy, but when I put it in tune, it was almost like a negative spot of radiant energy.
I just kind of wonder if you were pushing that sphere of energy a lot further out than you thought, and you created a null zone where the system
you
was.
could have made it more of a
That's my
receiver,
thought
less of a
process.
transmitter.
Oh, that's an interesting idea. Thank you. I'm going to try that. See if they're null points.
Definitely. That's something that if you find, you're right over the target. You're getting very close to what we've seen in some of the systems that we're operating now.
Oh, thank you. That's a really good idea. I'll test that.
Awesome. Hey, Tim.
Hey, guys.
Hey, Tim.
I got the invite. Thank you for having me on.
Hi, Tim.
Absolutely.
Hey.
Nice to meet you. You're kind of a legend.
Oh, thank you, Shawn. I'm not a legend. I'm beat up. Especially
It's good to have you here, Tim.
Aren't we all?
Yeah. I'm gonna get Gerald to come at the APEC conference. I'll probably pull Old Man Builds back in at some point too. And I was thinking about getting Ben to come on at some point as well. But
Awesome.
yeah. So
Nice.
Jared, you guys know Jared Yates, right? So I was in Reno with him last week. That was our secret mission, and so we were helping the family of Dr. Friedwart Winterberg reveal